listening to the Ropes and Riffs podcast with your host, John Kiernan.
Welcome to this episode of the Ropes and Riffs podcast. This is your host, John, wrestling entrance theme song composer. So as you know, we talk all about music and wrestling entrance themes. And today, we're going to be speaking with somebody who is both a huge wrestling personality and someone who's huge into music, which you probably know from his show, Vinyl Obsession. I'm talking about Eric Young. We're going to go ahead and talk all about Vinyl Obsession, his passion for music, which obviously will coincide with my passion for music, as well as talk about all of the different themes he's had over his career from TNA to WWE and NXT. I'd like to dive into a little bit of the Sanity theme with him also, because that one's a banger, and then even up to Violent by Design. So we're going to talk about all those things. We're going to jump here in a second, but before we jump in, thank you for checking out the Ropes and Riffs podcast. You can check us out anywhere you listen to your podcast. So Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, any of those outlets that you listen to, go ahead, check it out, subscribe if you like the show, and leave us a comment over on any of those outlets. Love hearing the feedback from you, the fans. Love hearing that you love what we're doing. And I love doing this for you guys. So let us know what you think of the show. If you go ahead and leave a comment over there, I'll go ahead and read it on the show here as well. So again, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, YouTube, wherever you pick up your podcasts. Go ahead, subscribe on there, like and follow, do all those fun things, and leave us some comments. I love hearing what you guys are thinking of the show, and I love interacting with you guys. We've had a lot of great things happening over on YouTube and over on all the podcasting directories, so thank you so much for your support. I don't make this show without the support from you guys, so thank you so much. On top of that, as always, if you donate $10 or more to PayPal at Ropes and Riffs, that's ROPES, the letter N, RIFFS, $10 or more gets you a shout out on the show. And again, I love hearing from you guys. I love shouting people out on the show. Without further ado, let me introduce my guest at this time, the one and only Eric Young.
Pretty wild.
And I feel like nowadays the sicknesses are just kind of elongating. Like I was just having this conversation with somebody yesterday. It's like, I feel like when I was younger, like 10 years ago, okay, you'd get sick and then it would be gone. Now it's like, oh, I guess you're sick for a month now and your voice is gone for at least 2 of those. So
yeah, that's where I'm sitting right now. So I feel mostly fine, but just this thing for a while.
Ugh. Well, let me know if anything happens, and I'll cut this part out. Let me know if at any point you're like, dude, my throat is gone. So
oh yeah, no worries. I'm used to it always kind of sounding like this. So
well, talking about that, you have been somebody who I've wanted to bring on the show since before we even got started. I was sending you some messages saying, hey, you have Vinyl Obsession. You're somebody who obviously is so passionate about music. You're somebody that has so many different themes. You're like the staple person I wanted to bring on this show. And we bring in a lot of different wrestlers and musicians and talk about all different things. But as somebody who just launched such an awesome show in Vinyl Obsession and is bringing on so many different guests, all ranging from like Steve Vai to John Five to Melissa Joan Hart, it's like, let's just start there. Let's just talk about and nerd out on some of that music stuff. So Vinyl Obsession, I say it just came out, but it's been going strong for a little bit now. You're already in season 2.
Yeah, this is season 2. They didn't have a host in the first season. So it was the same show. It's just there wasn't a host to kind of tie it together. Obviously, I'm a very small part of the show. The star of the show is really vinyl music. And then, the 1B would be, some musicians that's been making music and people have been buying their music for 40 plus years, or some mogul in the industry like Bobby Bones, or, the list goes on and on. There's a lot of great guests on the show. Really proud of the show. I don't think there'll be a season 3. They're going a different direction at Access TV, but there are some other things in the works. I got the show because I pitched another idea that I got to keep under wraps, but about vinyl music, and then they're like, oh, well, we were looking for a host for this vinyl show that we already have, and that's how I ended up on Vinyl Obsession. And great name. I am obsessed with vinyl myself. I got over 2,000 albums downstairs in my record room, and Yeah, just super proud of the show. I mean, I don't think a lot of people watched it, which is why it's not going to continue. Um, there's lots of stuff we can get into about that. It has nothing to do with the show, or me, or the guests, or anybody that made the show. Um, but the truth is just that, it was on at a weird time, and not enough people watched it. But everyone that watched it had good things to say about it. So, and you know how social media can be. There's a negative Nelly in every group, but there was very, very few of those.
I mean, the thing that's really cool about Vinyl Obsession too is you have so many people from all across the board coming into the show.
Yeah.
And on top of all that, you're getting them in a way rekindling a little bit of what they felt when they first listened to like that first record or that first vinyl. And you see that with everyone from like Melissa Joan Hart to John 5, and it's just cool to be able to see, at least for me, musicians that I've grown up with, that I've respected, nerding out and just having such a good time with music that helped raise me, and I'm sure was very pivotal to them too. And it was funny too to see Melissa Joan Hart on there too, because she is a wrestling fan, so there's that cool connection there. But it's so interesting, the guests that you had on. Who's been your favorite guest that you were able to interact with on the show?
I mean, each one has its own kind of thing. Obviously, Dave Mustaine, getting to talk to him, like, look, I'm not even what I would say like a massive Megadeth fan. Like, I respect the music and I like it, especially while I'm working out. But in that like thrash metal space, he's a god. His metal guitar playing is considered some of the best, if not the best in the world. And in that realm of music, in that bubble of music, he's considered one of like the forefathers of thrash music in North America. So stuff like that is cool. I was a huge Bush fan. Still am a huge Bush fan. So, and Gavin Rossdale is like twice as cool as I thought he would be. Like, I thought he'd be cool. And then I got to hang out with him for a day, and you're like, somehow he's cooler than he looks. And it's wild. But yeah, like, kind of like to your point was, I feel like part of their guard is down because they're in this thing. They're not asked to be talk about themselves, which can be a thin line for people that are creative. And you're being asked to talk about yourself, but you don't want to come across as egotistical. You want to be personable, but if you're only talking about yourself, you don't seem personable. So as a person very low down in that world, I can tell you that it can come across that way when it's not even meant to be. And they had this opportunity just to talk about things that they like and that they're passionate about. And I think their guard comes down and they become very relaxed. And all of them seemed genuinely happy to be there and happy to be like flipping through the boxes and chit-chatting about music. And that's really the base of the show, because we can all identify anyone that is a collector of vinyl or a lover, even just a lover of music in general. Like, what's better than talking about your favorite music? And that's what the whole show is.
And I think it's even different than if you were to say, let's just come on, let's go ahead and look through an iPod, what's some of your favorite music, that kind of thing. It's you're actually, you're going into the record store and you're kind of getting them back to when they were a kid, not just from what they were listening to, but for me, while I wasn't necessarily old enough to be able to go to vinyl stores and whatnot, for me it was CDs, it was tapes, right, going into all that. And if I ever go into a place that still has all that, I'm just like, man, this is the coolest thing in the world to just see new records and things like that, because everyone can go on their phone now and pick out the songs that they loved when they were like 2, 3, 4, 10, all that stuff. But to be able to go in and, like you said, flip through the records, sometimes you don't even know what you're going to get. Sometimes you don't even know if they're going to have the record that inspired you. And then all of a sudden you'll come across another one. You're like, oh my God, I remember what I was doing that thing. Totally. Yeah.
And I think, being from a certain vintage, like, obviously, like, even me, when I got into purchasing my own music, it was CDs. And I've always been around records because my parents had records.
Yeah.
But we had records even when we didn't have a record player. And I used to think that was insane. I think I kind of still do think that's insane, but I was very thankful because I got my mom and dad's record collection, which was massive, and a lot of stuff that I grew up listening to. And there you can hear that a bunch of the show is there's always this like familiar connection, or this was a record my sister listened to over and over, and she was 3 years older than me, and then I stole it from her, and that's how I got into punk rock music. And like, there's a lot of things like that, but I think there's something very animalistic and ritualistic about the whole process of vinyl, of the hunting, gathering. I know this is going to sound like I've thought about it way too much, and maybe I have, but like, the hunting, gathering thing is something that's in us as human beings. Like, it's part of our genetics, and it can't be erased. Like a dog that herds, or or a dog that barks, or a dog that hunts. They just know these things, right? And hunting and gathering has been part of the human condition for thousands, as long as we've been a species. So going to a store and looking and searching through, it touches on that. And then there's like this kind of ritual of like taking it out of the seal and pulling it out of the sleeve and dropping it on the needle, holding it on the edges, and don't scratch the vinyl. And like, there's something very ritualistic about it, which I think is appealing to all people, even if they know it or not. It's appealing to them at like such a primalistic level, and it touches all of those things. And we're sitting around the campfire swapping stories about the first time we heard this album, or first time we saw the cover, or the first time we bought a record, or whatever it is. And that's like the beauty of the show. It's just touching on this thing that everyone can identify with in some way. Music is such a combining thing. It's like something that's kind of prevalent in everyone's life, whether massively or even just, I listen to music for 15 minutes a day when I drive to work. Music is part of everyone's life, so it's just a great show, and I wish there was going to be about 100 more of them.
And you know what, though? Vinyl is one of those things where it was also a different way to listen to music. Like you said, completely different experience. You're taking it out of the wrapping, even so much to where side A has one thing, side B has another thing. And this was also back in the day where, if you release a record now and you want to do something kind of cool at the end, like, okay, your last song hits, then there's like 10 minutes of silence, and then you've got this little hidden thing at the end. On a vinyl, you used to be able to do that, and people would be like, oh my God, that's super cool, because they didn't expect it. They didn't stop it. They just kind of let the record go. Now, all of a sudden, you'll pick up like a record, and the last track will be 15 minutes long, but the song is 3 minutes. And you're like, all right, there's a thing there. Or iTunes or Apple or whatever will go ahead and say hidden track, and then like it'll be like 13 silences, and then one last thing at the end, which they had to name. So you're like, even back then, the discovery of what may be at the end of a record or something else that's just even more creative is embedded in kind of the artistry of being on a vinyl thing. Even CD didn't. Or CD had that a little bit, but again, you see the timer go up. But vinyl gave like even more credence to being even more creative, I think.
Yeah, I think there is really something to that. And like, and a lot of people talked about, it wasn't something that was like crazy appealing to me, but always kind of part of the process was the cover art.
Yeah.
And that like was a part of CDs. Like, you can, you get the little plastic case and you slide that little, the little insert out. That was, it was similar, right? It was like kind of the new age version of what, if there was like a record insert, or a lyric insert, or there was just an art insert in the middle, and a lot of times the cases would fold to reveal other art on the inside that you didn't know that was there until you bought it and opened it, right? I mean, the internet, when I was young, didn't exist, and when people were buying records in, the 70s, there was no way to know what was inside. And then if they pulled it out and it wasn't just black vinyl, it was colored vinyl or something different.
That was it.
It would blow their minds, right? Like, so, and you wouldn't know unless you bought it. And you would hear, like, oh, did you hear that, Ozzy Osbourne's, new things they're made with bat blood and like all this crazy stuff that was part of the lore of who he was. So, yeah, I'm just infinitely proud of the show, and was so happy to be chosen to work on it. Worked along a bunch of amazing people, from cameraman to producers and executive producers. So it was an amazing experience.
And you know what? There's nothing saying that down the road you can't pick up something like that. You have so many different people in the industry and so many different people in music and wrestling that there's so many opportunities to pick that back up. And you got me now thinking about what was maybe the first vinyl that I had ever seen, because my dad, same thing. He had lots of vinyls. And I think probably one of the first experiences with music that he brought me into on vinyl was the Magic Mystery Tour. And I remember hearing that when I was so young, and I wasn't into music really seriously until I was probably about, let's say 13, 14 or whatnot. So this was years before I was even like, oh, okay, cool. Music is something I want to do professionally or do anything. And this is just me listening as a kid. And I remember how, like, again, like we all do, or like we all did, we had those giant cabinets full of vinyls. And it's just,
Yep.
I remember that he would go ahead and pull that out. And that was like a daily or a weekly thing for him when he got home from work to be able to listen to. And that's where I was thinking, like, oh man, the side A, the side B, all that. Man, this is bringing me back to my childhood too.
Yeah, and this is what would happen on the show, right? Like
Yeah.
you sit down and have these conversations with people, and they would see a cover or they would see a band name, like, oh, Duran Duran. I haven't thought about that forever. And me and my teenage sister went to the mall and we wanted this thing and it was sold out and it was snowing and like all these like memories can come flooding back to them, and I'm there living that in real time, and it's just so cool how things like that just connect everybody so easily and so quickly, and how something that someone probably hasn't thought of in 20 or 30 years can just come vividly back, and that's the power of music. I think the number one power of music is that the nostalgia of it, the reminiscing, you can hear a song and it can transport you to a time in life where that was playing in the background, or that was playing at someone's birthday party, or that was playing at your first dance with a girl, or or whatever it is. It's a really, really powerful thing, man, and I'm really happy to even be part of such a small part of that show. So
Yeah, and even talking about the marriage of music with wrestling, which is what we're going to talk about next, is the entrance themes or the music in the packages or the music for a show. Any of that stuff, music has played such a pivotal role in the entrance themes in wrestling. And I would argue to say that even over the last 15, 20 years or so, even going back further than that, you have so many of these iconic entrance themes that help build the brand and help build the vision of any of the wrestlers. And like I said to you before we hopped on air, you're somebody that has been in the industry and has made such a staple over the last amount of years. And, you're somebody that has gone through lots of different character changes, someone who has innovated, someone who has been able to take part in everything from the most serious of characters to really funny things to things that are even more outside the box. And so, for you, I think uniquely over many other wrestlers, you've had a lot of different entrance themes over time that evoke lots of different emotions based on what you're doing. Everything from what you were doing with Team Canada, all the way to Sanity, all the way to what you're doing now, Violent by Design. With what you were doing, Violent by Design. Why can't I say that? With what you were doing with Violent by Design and all of the different themes you've had for anything you've done in your solo run. For you, when you're coming up with an entrance theme, or for when you're working with somebody on it, or you're choosing it, what are some of the things that you're thinking about in that process of choosing an entrance theme?
the biggest thing for me is mood and feel. I could even pick a song that I don't even like hearing, just depending on the mood that I want to set. And I think it's, entrance themes and package themes, that's the soundtrack to wrestling. Like if you were to release a soundtrack, you release wrestling themes.
Yeah.
And the truth is people hear that before they even see you, right? Like there's so many iconic, entrance themes like ba-da, ba-da, da-da. You hear that, who's coming through, then the glass breaks and here he comes and someone's getting their ass kicked, right? Like that's just so iconic, and it's such, of course, because I've been this diehard wrestling fan for so long, but anyone that has even kind of loosely watched, if you said that riff to them, they would know who that is.
Yeah.
And it draws a picture in their mind. They don't even have to see them. So it's having the right song can really set the tone for who you are. And I say this if I do seminars and things like that, like you got to pick a song that fits. Like when Jason Voorhees is creeping around through the woods, they're not playing marching band music, right?
Yeah.
That it would take you out of visually of what's going on, right? So if you're trying to portray someone that's evil, like when I was in Violent by Design, when you hear that music, it should sound violent and it should sound mean and unforgiving and volatile and all of those things because it's the soundtrack of who you are. Once you hear those first couple bars of that song, you know, here comes Violent by Design, and the mood in an arena can change. So it's crazy important, right? And I've had I say privilege. I think some people would look at it differently, but I've done, so many different characters. But each time, like, there's lots of thought put into what the music should be. And like Eric Tompkins, he's head of production for TNA. More people should know his name because TNA probably doesn't exist without him. Certainly doesn't exist in the creative realm that it is without him. And he is a guy that I've trusted to help me find the right one, right? They have a database of millions of songs, and you can kind of type in to the database bluesy rock or rap rock or whatever, and it brings up now it's not 10 million, now it's only 10,000. You just start clicking and listening. So my current one is like a spin-off of Johnny Cash covering Nine Inch Nails. So it's I don't even know if it's good like babyface music, but he said it sounds like star music, right? And it's certainly not upbeat in what you would think about for a babyface, but when you hear it, there's some kind of a tone that it sets. And I mean, in wrestling, it's everything now, and a bad one could ruin your night. So.
Yeah, and you say it's a matter of like the baby face or the heel, but really I think you dialed in on a second ago is it's all really about your character. It's what are you trying to evoke even further than, okay, am I going to be a bad guy tonight? Am I being a good guy tonight? It's really more in the way I've always said it when I write themes for wrestlers is each wrestler is like a movie. Each wrestler is telling their own story, and you're scoring that on their way to the ring. And people have that in the back of their minds as you're in the ring. They remember what happened before. And like you said, your theme now may not be babyface, it may not be heel, but it's more something that is when Eric Young's there, you know what Eric Young is about. You know what EY's coming to the ring to do. And, I think that's even true with a lot of the themes that you've had over time, even something like Blood and Fire, which you've also had a great opportunity to be able to work with, as you said, Tompkins over there, but you've also been able to work with Dale Oliver to be able to create some awesome music for you too over the years.
Yep.
That one's the one for me that I don't know why. Over all of the themes that you've done, like out of all the solo themes that I have heard for you, that's the one that always I remember. And maybe it was because of the stories that you were in at the time with like MVP and all that kind of stuff. But for me, that one was always just like, whether Eric Young is coming to kick ass, whether he's coming to, do some comedy work, whether he's just coming out to entertain, or whether he's going to come out to like break your neck, all of those things, it just seemed like such, I don't know why. It was upbeat, but it seemed so up the middle of the road for what you were doing.
Yeah, that with Dale was, it was the first time that I was going to be a heel, a bad guy in a long time. And for me, the music is just so important. It sets a tone and like your entrance and all that stuff. And I heard When the Levee Breaks by Led Zeppelin. And there's just something about that slow bass line and the, it made me like want to like do this and like badass slow strut walk. And I told Dale like I wanted to be obviously not When the Levee Breaks, but like a modern version of that. So he took that song and incorporated some guitar riffs from a band like Wolf Mother, which is some really heavy, cool guitar
Great
stuff.
Band. Yeah,
and
great band.
Ended up, I really love the song. And I love mostly that at that point, Dale was writing almost all of it at TNA and getting a chance to decide, like, for years, just like, this is your new music, and that goes on in a lot of places. You don't get to pick or have say or any of that. So it was really cool to be part of the process and know that I had nothing to do with the making of the music, but the vision of what I wanted it to sound like and what I wanted people to feel like. I was able to be part of that process. And I think that was like a really coming out part for me in my career, that part of my career. So that's obviously one that I'm very fond of.
And I think a lot of people think of all the entrance theme song composers that have existed in different companies, but I think Dale Oliver is somebody that rightfully so gets a lot of credit from kind of a hardcore audience of wrestling, but I don't think he gets quite the credit that he deserves from more of a wide audience, because he was doing some amazing music at the time for you, for everybody. You know, if you go back and you listen to a lot of what he did, I would venture to say that a lot of the music that he came up with, you could tell, you know, maybe where an influence was from, but you
Sure.
could totally hear the uniqueness of Dale Oliver. And it's funny, not a lot of people really bring up how the collaborative process was with him, but it sounds like from your experience with Dale Oliver, it was a really great process of going back and forth. I'd love you to outline a little bit as to how it was working with Dale Oliver. I know you didn't write the music, like you said,
Yeah,
but it
obviously.
seems like it was pretty collaborative.
Yeah, it's very collaborative. He, first of all, like, I mean, Dale had worked here forever and had, like, he's from and around Nashville. So we traveled, you know, on a lot of the same planes and spent a lot of hours in airports, and a really nice guy, obviously talented guy, plays all instruments. Dale was really receptive to, like, this. He's like, oh, yeah, I could do something like this. And, but like I said, it was When the Levee Breaks, Led Zeppelin, which is, I think, one of my favorite tunes of theirs, is that music just seemed so badass and made me want to like just kind of like be in my own head. And there's also this weird underlining, I think, to a lot of Led Zeppelin's music where it's not angry, but it sounds like it could be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. It's, you know, and When the Levee Breaks was just such a cool, slow riff that made, for lack of a better word, I told Dale, it makes me want to strut, kind of like a peacock, you know, and slow, and like this grimace on my face where I'm just kind of taking my own time, and you guys are all here to look at me, and I'm going to do whatever the hell it is I want to do.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't even know if that it'll be. You know, maybe I'll grab a fan, maybe I'll grab the referee, maybe I'll whatever. You know, I wanted it to feel unpredictable, and the song itself is very like constructed, but it I don't know, it just, I really loved it. And I think the reason I loved it most is because I was part of the process of picking what it sounded like. And I was also, that was a very like important part of my career, where I was going from being a guy that kind of had been around a lot and done a lot of things to being like kind of like a main player on the top part of the card. So,
and you were a main player, I think, through a lot of your time in TNA, especially I want to say like the back half of it, going into NXT and then even coming back into TNA later on. Like, you've always been somebody that's been a staple, and to be able to have music that is recognizable at all stages of your career, that tells people what they can expect, that's huge. And it's a big thing to Dale Oliver. And I know that you said that Led Zeppelin sounds aggressive sometimes, or like sounds a little bit more like, maybe more aggressive than they should. We could all thank John Bonham for hitting the crap out of those drums harder than most people will ever hit the crap out of the drums. So that's awesome. And then you have all this different music that you're using with different groups, with your solo runs in TNA, Impact Wrestling. And then you make the move over to NXT. And there was that first theme that you had used when it was you and Samoa Joe in the ring. And first off, everybody kind of knew it was happening. Everyone was like, what's going on? That's just what we said. But everyone knew it was going on. That was probably one of my favorite moments in NXT history, if I'm being honest with you. Because, again, you being somebody who had been such a fan of for so long, you and Samoa Joe, if I'm being honest, seeing you pop up there, I was like, oh, this is crazy. This is cool. And hearing that theme that you had there, it was an interesting theme. I don't know if it was as, in my opinion, iconic as what I had heard in TNA, but I'm also willing to go down the fan road of that and be like, man, I wish they would have just taken the Dale Oliver theme and just moved that right over. And that was a CFO theme that you had with them when you would come over up front. And we'll get into the Sanity stuff in a second, but what was the process working in NXT and WWE on at least that first theme?
Yeah, the first one was I had finished up my contract with TNA Wrestling, and Triple H had reached out about wanting to meet with me. You know, there was no offer or anything, just wanted me to fly down. They'd fly me down to an NXT taping, and me and him would meet. That was only, that was it. That was the only thing that was told. And it's, in kind of an old school rule is whether you're booked or not, you take your stuff, right? You take your wrestling stuff. Sure. I was not supposed to wrestle. There was never mention of me wrestling, none of that. We met during the day at the Performance Center. At the time, the Performance Center was in a different building, and then they taped all the NXT episodes at Full Sail University. So you go over to Full Sail, and you're there during the day, and you're meeting everybody in the rings there or whatever. And I think the show started at like 6, and it was around 4:30, 5 o'clock. Someone said, "Hey, Triple H has a question for you if you can meet him down by ringside." So I went down by ringside. He's like, "I got this idea. Joe had just beat Finn Balor for the world title. He's going to open the show with an open challenge, and then some music will hit and graphics, and you'll come out and challenge him. And you guys, just put something together, no problem, main event, no big deal." Like, you guys have wrestled 1,000 times. Like, I don't think me and Joe had ever really touched. We certainly hadn't wrestled a singles match ever. I think we had been in a couple tags or 6-man tags where we interacted a little bit, but like we really didn't work. I've known him forever. He's still a very good friend of mine, but it's not like we had all this things to go on. So the match was kind of thrown together really quickly. And the theme was like, do you have any images on your gimmicks? And I had shared the pin art of those. That's why it looks all weird, because it wasn't meant to be put on a video screen that size. And the song, there was like 10 songs. It was like, "Oh, just listen to any of these," and that was the one I kind of picked out. He said, "This won't be your music. It'll just be your music for tonight," kind of thing. So I liked it. I really liked that song, and but it wasn't right for really later on what they decided to do with the Sanity thing. That had to be constructed from the ground up, and happily to say, like, part of why I really liked working with the WWE at that point was Triple H was very inclusive, and still is, from what I understand, still is today. So he wanted my input, and the other guys weren't in the group yet. I was the group by myself, so I got to pick the colors, and I had my first jacket designed, and all the jackets that were designed after that were designed off of that one, and how we looked and the idea of it was a lot of it was from my brain and collaborating with him. And he doesn't get even though like people like him and stuff, I don't know if people he gets the full respect of like a lot of like the best stuff in the last 15 years has come from his head. And I think the proof is in the pudding right now, right? It's on such a juggernaut level, and that all starts with him because he's at the top of the tree. And I'm huge respect to him of allowing me to choose, and I went through that database for hours. Hours and hours, and then he had kind of settled on a few, and I settled on a few, and I said, this is the one I really like, but that song had no heavy guitar in it. And I said, over top of all that, there should be like a really like heavy, like thrash metal guitar riff. And then they had Jim Johnson and his crew put it together and mash it up and add in kind of a guitar riff. And even I think that bass, the bass that's in that, I don't think it was as prominent. And I think I said that both the guitar riff and that bass should be like kind of the forefront of the show. They adapted the music that they had already wrote to more our thing, and then the final part is the Sanity music, which is badass.
Yeah, the Sanity music and just the gimmick in general and just the presentation, everything worked so well together. That music is, as you said before, it's like the glue for everything. And with that music, it's interesting to note that from what it sounds like, it was kind of a combination of like a library track, like, okay, let's look at all these different things. And then you give it off to CFOs and they go ahead and say, okay, cool, let's add this. And they're collaborating with you. And they're saying, you know what, let's go ahead and add all of these different elements. And I think that's something that a lot of people may overlook, is the fact that there are songs that are 100% original, 100% from the head of the composer with collaboration with the wrestler, but then there are some that are also direction taken or parts kind of brought into something that might already exist because there's some already good skeletons and bones to something like that. And that kind of sounds like that's what it was with Sanity.
Yeah, exactly what it was. There was a bass to it, and it sounded really cool, but they added in like the the helicopter and
Yeah.
the firebomb blowing up and people screaming and running and stuff at the start to make it feel like chaotic, and then it's and then it comes in and like the spotlights would come in on the stage and we'd walk out and there would be smoke and like it's all really well thought through, right? Like I mean everything that you see is why it looks so good is it's thought of, right? Like it's for sometimes painstakingly for hours and hours. So it's that's definitely one of those labor of love things, and like I could do that every day. Like it's just such a cool process and fun process, and just music is just such an important part of what we do. It's the first part of us, of any character that you hear or see. I'm behind the curtain when it plays, and most guys are behind the curtain when it plays. And you want that start, those first few notes to hit, and the lights come on a certain way, and certain lights go off in a certain way, and the smoke is in a certain way. People can anticipate who's coming out before they even see them, right? The anticipation is a huge part of what we do and a huge part of, music, right? Like, how long have people been like, thank you guys, and leaving the stage, and then everyone claps like lunatics, and then they come back out and play? That's been going on for 100 years, right? Like, everyone there is well aware they're not going to leave, but they still leave and walk off stage. The only person I've ever seen not do that is Dave Matthews. He just said, this is the part where we walk off and then you guys clap a bunch, but we're kind of up against the time. So we're not going to leave. We'll just play a couple more songs. So he could have played a couple more songs, which is cool.
He's like, you can clap for like a second. One more song. Got it. Great. Let's go.
Yeah. You guys know the trick because we've all been to a concert where they do that. And like, I like when they do it because it makes people clap and get even louder, and it's fun to be part of that and thinking, oh, like we clapped loud enough and they came back out. They couldn't say no. Like it happens in every building, at every show, almost anywhere in the world. But I feel like if some artist didn't do it, you would feel disappointed. Like it's part of the experience. And that's like to your point of like music being part of the wrestling experience. It's not a rock and roll show, but it's definitely, music is such a massive part of pro wrestling and the pro wrestling world.
It's close enough to a rock and roll show. I mean, with all the things that happen, absolutely.
Rock and roll show, but people are actually getting hurt.
Totally. Now, one thing I do want to bring back real quick to the Sanity theme is one thing that I've always really loved about it too is you have the group Sanity theme. But then one thing that I've loved, it doesn't happen all the time in wrestling, but it's happened with a couple of different factions. It's happened with wrestlers that I've worked with over time that have come from a group and gone solo or vice versa, is you can take elements of that theme and bring them into even solo versions of an entrance theme. And from that from the Sanity theme came the version for Nikki Cross, where she has like that brutal female scream, and then there's a little bit of a beat drop and difference. You had the one for Big Damo, where it brought in more of like the bagpipes and things like that. And it was really cool to be able to see that for each individual person, there were still these little elements of, we're all part of Sanity. It shouldn't be that all of a sudden we leave the group, and if the group's not disbanded, then all of a sudden there's just a complete 180-degree shift. It was like, it's this continuity that I think modern wrestling for TV is really able to do, because then it becomes more like a movie, like we talked about earlier, more like a TV show. You have this group, and wherever they go, you're thinking of this group or this faction or this person as they evolve over time. There's little elements, little musical themes that it's like, oh, they started here, now 4 years later they're here, but this is where it all started. Everyone talks about Roman Reigns' theme, where it's like, oh, you had the Shield thing for a while, and then even in like that new theme, you hear little elements of that, like the little guitar riff slowed down, brought in. It's just cool because it makes that continuity happen even more for an audience member between, okay, we're here and now we're here. Until you do that 180-degree shift where you're like, I'm no longer with the group, now it's a brand new thing.
Yeah, and that's it's important for those through lines, because some people can get so connected to that piece of art. That is who you are. Like if Steve Austin, he's had a couple different versions of his theme, right?
Yeah.
But in the start of every one, once they got to that part where you hear that glass break, that was the cue for the crowd to scream.
Yeah.
right? And without that, it wouldn't feel like his. And there was like the Disturbed version, and there was, but it was all the same kind of riff and same kind of feel. Because if you didn't get that, you felt ripped off as a customer. And I think when they did the Sanity ones, it was cool because we wanted to feel not like an actual group, not like a wrestling group. Like if you notice on the shows, like we barely did any interviews on the set.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to feel like we were part of that world. We wanted to feel like we were from this other world coming to take this world kind of thing. So like we Triple H, this is part of his vision too, and I agree with it, was shooting, we shot in the bowels of the center stage in Atlanta. We shot on the roof at Full Sail, right, with the light, spotlights kind of looking up. You can't tell where we are. We're just on this crappy tar roof on this school, but it looked and felt different. And having Nikki have her own, and the Celtic music and Damos, and me and Wolf when we tagged was slightly different from when Wolf and Damo tagged. And it was, I think, kind of like, not like a cookie, but fans pick up on it.
Yeah.
And it makes each entrance feel special. Also, if we were wrestling, if Nikki had a match and then I had a match and maybe the other guys were having a tag, you would hear the same theme 3 times. People get tired of it. So they're having those slight variations. It just is more important because each individual wanted to feel individualistic. And we're just using the same music, it's a lot harder to do.
And now we go into the Violent by Design music that you have, which is 9 Lives, right? It's a theme that you've used on your own. It's a theme that's been used with Violent by Design. That one, I believe, is from a band. Or was that, from everything that I've seen, that one's from a band? And
yeah, a lot of the TNA themes are from bands. So there's, I don't know what it's called, but it's like a database where, as a band, you can submit your stuff. And I think that database will send you, like X amount of dollars every time it's used, or maybe it's 1 fee per album, and then now your music. I don't know who it was. It was someone in AEW used a song, the Violent by Design theme, as like a package because they're using the same database.
Sure.
Wrestling minds all think alike. So a production person there was like, "Oh, this sounds cool." Well, this is a song I've been using on TV for 1.5 years, but you're welcome to use it because it's available to everybody on this database. So, and I think both companies pull from that same database, but it's literally millions and millions of songs, and some of it is just people that make music with their computer. Some is bands, some are just singles. Some, it's all kinds of different things.
It's funny because for me, with some of the music I've worked on for even talents over at TNA, we've done Brian Meyer's theme with It Lives, It Breathes, Masha Slamovich's first theme when she came in was something that I did. And when I started doing themes, I was always just like, how do you even start doing that? And a lot of it has been just communicating with wrestlers such as yourself, saying, hey, I'd love to be able to work on something with you. And then over time, you end up seeing that there are all different places that places pull from. And especially when it comes to TV, it comes to rights, and that's why the libraries are so big. It's like you can look and see, here's all this different music. But it's funny because over time now, it's like it's gone from being what I would just call like production house music or like just royalty-free music, all the way to becoming like, oh yeah, like you said, actual bands are putting this out and the music's awesome. You can always go to a composer to get something really specific, which a lot of people still do. But a lot of that library music that WWE, AEW, TNA pull from, it's really quality stuff because you're actually getting it from bands. And, if you're not working with those bands one-on-one, I think they're doing a real good service on being able to get wrestlers really high-quality themes that can rep them, and also saying, hey, let's work with musicians who are actually putting things out and bring that into the fold too, while keeping the rights as simplistic as possible and good for all parties.
Yeah, I mean, like, as you know, like, it's just such an impossible industry to break through.
Yeah.
I've got a very distinct story about it. I'm not going to use his name because I don't want to get him in any trouble, but a buddy of mine has a band here in Nashville, and they tour all over North America. They're bigger in the United States because rock and roll music is still alive and well over there.
Yeah.
Really cool rock band. he had just released a new album, him and his band, and I think I can't remember what label. It's a big label. I want to say it was Sony he was under. They can come after me. I don't care. But we basically were doing this vignette for Violent by Design, and I went to Eric Tompkins and said, this song for this thing that we're doing would be perfect. He listened to it. He's like, man, you're right. Can you reach out to him and see if it's cool? And I did. And he said, yeah, absolutely. Here's my manager. He'll set it all up. Talk to that guy. And then we got this email from Sony saying, like, you got to pay $800. And, like, it's going to be played for 9 seconds, and the most people in North America are going to hear his music. We're not going to pay. We'll just use one of the songs off the database that we already pay for.
Right.
But if you want to, we could watermark, so-and-so and Sony Music at the bottom, and they wouldn't budge. They wouldn't budge. And I can say a lot of people here now, him included, are doing it themselves. I feel like he was kind of embarrassed. He apologized to me, and I was like, I felt bad for him. This is music that he wrote, that he produced and recorded in his own house, played lead guitar and did lead vocals, and his band did the rest of the music. Like, Sony has nothing to do with it. And they're saying, well, now you got to pay us $800. And he's saying, no, it's cool. I want them to use it so people will hear it and see it on national television.
Right.
And they said, no, we don't care. It's $800. And that's a lot of rock bands here, people that I follow, smaller bands, are self-producing and stuff. So they don't get into a situation like that. If they sell music, or people want to use their music, or they want to use their music, get their music out there, they have full rights. And I think that might be the best way to go now. Now with these big, obviously being joined to a massive music company, you're going to get distribution that you can't get on your own.
Right.
But to break through to that point, it seems like it's almost impossible, especially for rock and roll music in North America right now. So that's a bit of like the behind the scenes kind of pull the curtain thing of the song was perfect, right? And I wish we could have used it, but we ended up not being able to use it. One, $800 is not nothing. And they already pay for the rights of millions of these songs in this database. They're not going to pay for a song that we don't really need.
Of course.
I think it would have made the video better. And so did Eric. And that's why we reached out to the guy that wrote the music and produced it, but in the end, he didn't own it. So now, that's a couple of years back now, and now he, in the last year or two, he's kind of made an announcement and has his own label and does his own and controls it himself. And I don't know if that was the part of the thing that kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, but I feel like it was. And I hope he's doing well. We're not like close to anything. We talk, a couple times a year when he releases music, we chit chat about it. But my hope is that he's in a better spot, and at some point we can use another one of his songs, and he can just say yes, and then the conversation's over. There's a lot of that. Like, you just saw AW use Guns N' Roses. Like, that's I can't even imagine the price tag for the rights to be able to use that song.
It was funny. I was at the media scrum for that, and I had asked Tony Khan, I was just like, what do you think the impact is of being able to use, like, Guns N' Roses' November Rain for some of the hype packages? Because it's a well-known song. It's not a song you got from a library. And he's just like, I thought it was great. I thought it did great numbers. And, this is the first time that using Guns N' Roses' November Rain, it's the first time they ever got paid for it. So I don't know who he was slighting with that, but I was just like,
I think
all
we
right.
all know.
Yeah, and it's cool, though, that you talk in that respect, too, because in a lot of the times where I've worked with wrestlers and they end up going and using themes all over the place, there's different things as a musician you got to understand, like you said, is, if you're signed with a major label, a lot of the times that major label owns the music, regardless if you did it,
That's it.
And if you've done the music, then you have the ability to say, you know what, you can use it here, you can do custom contracts, you can do all those things. The distribution then comes down to you, right? The distribution comes down to you, the talent that's promoting it. And I will say, though, and I've said this on so many different of these shows and interviews and whatnot, you guys are like the nicest people in the world, wrestlers. I know that, like, there's everything that you see on TV, and not to pull the wall so far back, but, like, I feel like musicians and wrestlers have this symbiotic relationship of a rising tide raises all boats. And I know for me, my career in music wouldn't be where it was without professional wrestling. And, I will say all the companies that I've worked with have always been really cool once they understand the rights and things like that. There's always that, hey, we need to make sure that X, Y, and Z is covered, not pulling the
Sure.
wool back too much. But
Yep.
there's always things that as a musician who writes his own music, produces it, and then is licensing the contracts out, there are certain things that you kind of know you have to do, and certain things that you know that those songs won't be able to do. But the point is, it's like, if you really want to do music like this, then there's a couple ways right there. Is like, reach out to talent and work on one-on-one, or like you said, there's these really great libraries that these companies are using now, and
Yep.
the music is great quality. And just hope that if you're signed to a label, that you can go ahead and get the rights for it, because those can be costly. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Very tricky. I mean, it in the end, it's business, and bureaucracy exists in everything. And the truth is that those checks and balances aren't in place. People are just stealing it, right? Like, Guns N' Roses makes this amazing song, and a company pays for the rights for it and has the right to make money off of it because they're the ones paying Guns N' Roses, and AEW just played it and they made no money. That's not fair to them. So, like they said, I think with the invention of of the digital music space and Spotify and iTunes and databases like the one TNA and AEW and WWE all use, is there's this ability to get your stuff out. You've got to do all the work, you know what I mean? But there are avenues for it. I think a lot of artists don't like it, especially big money artists, because they feel they were making more money when it wasn't available to everybody. And I understand that.
Yeah.
But I think if they were in a different place, for a band, like a smaller band that doesn't have distribution like that and isn't connected to a thing for whatever reason, they can, put up a couple things and one of their tweets goes viral, and next thing they know, they've got, 1.5 million listens on a track that no one even knew about. Right. So it's there's good and bad to it. Business can be an ugly world. I try not to involve myself with it whenever possible.
My buddies in It Lives, It Breathes always talk about the Will Ospreay theme that they did, Elevated, and they were just like, we wrote that for Will when he was out doing like Rev Pro and doing some of like the more independent events, and he's taken that theme out to AEW, he's taken it to Wembley, he's taken it all over the place. And if you were to know kind of like the backstory behind it and all that, they would never have thought that song would have transcended into what it is now. But you think about that and you go, if you're willing to work, again, in this artistic community environment, and you're willing to go, you know what, let's work together, let's grow together, even if it's like, okay, cool, you don't have the marketing arm behind you of a record label, that wrestler goes places, that wrestler does a lot. And as wrestlers do, there's so many places that you guys go. So your music is going to get heard by so many people. And if you can really figure out the way to like really work with them and, like you said, create different things to where it's like, okay, cool, there's music videos, there's all different ways to promote, you can really still just be able to be symbiotically related to what happens with that song and that wrestler. So it's an interesting dynamic to be that. Two more things, and then we will conclude our conversation here. I know that you said that the music that you have chosen is based on the character you're portraying at the time. But to EY, all that aside, what is your favorite theme that you've used over time? And that could be either based on like, my musical taste is this, or what, this one was just so perfect for what we were doing that there's nothing else that I would have chosen for it.
Yeah, I think it's tough to pick that. Like, it's like saying, like, choose your favorite child. And I know, like, I was for sure the favorite more than my sister. She won't see this. Maybe she will. She'll think it's funny either which way.
Sis, if you're listening.
Yeah. It's like picking one of your... I think the one that Dale did for when I first became the world-class maniac, that's part of that, I think, is the nostalgia of thinking of the doors that opened for me, not the music itself, but like as I was growing into that character on the show. It's a very special song, and the people I was working with at the time and where I was on the card there. The NXT theme, the Sanity theme, that's my first time working for the WWE. I would have never left NXT if given the choice. I didn't want to. That's just how it worked. I loved working for Triple H, a guy I still talk to when given the chance. He's probably one of the busiest human beings on the earth, so we don't chit chat a lot, but we do go back and forth still, and still have a really good relationship. And right now, I mean, recency bias too, but I love Johnny Cash, and I love that song that he covered by Nine Inch Nails, "Hurt," and having that sample in it as part of it, and I was very involved in the way this one sounds. Eric Tompkins is the one that found it. That complete credit goes to him. I had kind of picked a different one, and then he said, just listen to this one. It maybe isn't like babyface music, but it feels like star music. And when I hear it, it just makes me feel like I'm important. And I don't think that I am, but in that time, when I come through that curtain, I should feel like the most important person on earth. Because people don't want to watch regular, boring me. People want to watch an elevated version. And that song can put me in that set, and I've done a lot of things and been around for a long time and have a ton of equity. Lots of people don't like what I do because it's art, and that's fine, right? There's lots of music that I don't listen to and a lot of TV shows that I don't like, and that's just the way it goes. But I think I've earned the respect of being like, he's done a bunch of stuff, because I have. And that song is one of my favorites because it makes me feel how I should, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When I'm coming out, there's 3,000 people there, and I say this in seminars sometimes too that I do, that music is important. And it might be the only time in your life, except maybe your wedding or some other weird time, where you have a whole room looking at you. The only time in your life that may happen. Every eyeball, you're not sharing it, maybe with your tag partner, but if it's a singles, that's what that song makes me feel like. It's like how they have the lights set up and the entrance and the timing of it, and I got to get up on the apron at a certain time, and all that stuff is thought through. But I think what that does is it creates a mood, and it creates a setting. And when that music plays, in my mind, and I'm hoping other people's minds, is like, you're going to get something good no matter what, because I've been doing it at a high level for so long, and I've proven that, and I think that that's what that song says.
I agree. And I interviewed Dijak recently, and he said a similar thing, kind of that you're echoing about the confidence piece, right? He's just like, your music can be whatever your music is, but you have to be confident when you go through the curtain. When you hear that, you got to be able to sell what you're doing. And he goes, same thing. He goes, when I go to seminars, I tell people that all the time. He's like, the music has to represent you. It's got to get you in the mood. It's got to get you in that mode. But as soon as you go through that curtain, people got to believe that you believe. If that's not happening, then no one's going to believe anything that you're doing. He goes, you don't have people that come to wrestling shows going, oh, I hope I hear this piece of music. What they do is they want to see the wrestlers. And if that piece of music is something that makes you feel confident, and inversely, if you're able to sell the whole package in that music you're confident with, you're like, you know what, I'm going through that curtain, let's make it happen, that's just going to sell your character even more to the audience.
Yeah, such a huge part of the experience. Like I said, like if they're there to see the wrestling, in the end, they want the bell to ring, and they want there to be a match.
Yeah.
But if there isn't these cool themes and cool entrances and, for lack of better word, costumes or whatever you want to call them, that's all part of it. And
right.
It's, there's just nothing like it. It's just all encompassing. And if you don't get those elements, even like to a person that would be new to it, I think they would feel ripped off because they know that's been, music has just been a part of it for hundreds of years now. And
right.
it's such an important now with how highly it's produced, and like it being on Netflix, Raw on Netflix the other day. It's one of the best produced things I've seen ever, period, full stop, right? Like not TV, not movie, one of the best produced pieces of entertainment ever.
Yeah.
And the world is finding something out that I think you knew as a wrestling fan and I knew as a wrestling fan. Wrestling is unreal. Like it's just this unreal world and unreal thing that we all get to do, and the real world is figuring out that it's awesome too, right? It's a billion-dollar industry, multi-billion-dollar industry. It's wild to think.
And I'm so happy to see where wrestling has come over the last, like you said, hundreds of years. And it's just, they've called it the king sport, and where it is now is just absolutely amazing. And the last question I have for you before we conclude here, and I ask everyone who comes on this show, if you were to give people 3 songs that represent Eric Young as a person, that you throw on a Spotify playlist and you say, hey, listen to these 3 songs, and this gives you a full feel of who I am, what are those 3 songs that it would be?
Oh, geez. I think that would depend on when you catch me. It's pretty early in the morning. Not early, but early enough for me. Colors by Black Pumas. I'm a person that I want everyone to get along and be inclusive and be included in everything. And I think the weird barriers that people have put up that still exist somehow in 2025 are archaic and stupid. So Colors by a band called Black Pumas, which I love. 3. Let me think. I would say anything by the Teskey Brothers, because the guy's voice just makes me feel good. I can tell I've seen them like 3 times live, and they're just as good live as they are recorded, which is, as a musician, can be rare.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we get to where I'll just say F you, I won't do what you told me by Rage Against the Machine, because I don't like people telling me what to do. So been that way my whole life.
And it's not an official list if you don't throw Rage Against the Machine on there.
Yeah, well, I have to include Rage because I think they're probably my favorite band of all time. So
It's awesome. Yeah, they're amazing. And I think anyone would tell you that. Well, EY, thank you so much for making the time today. It's been such an honor having you on the show. You've been someone I wanted to talk to for quite some time. And I thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Cheers, man. Yeah, it was fun to chit-chat.